Back in the 80s, I believe I went to see my uncle who lived in Gorham, New Hampshire, which is just on the border of the White Mountains. And he took me for a little trip to the White Mountains National Forest. And I had my camera, and I thought, wow, this would be a good idea to take some pictures, and it would fit into my ecology class very well. So we went and we started our little trip. So this is a sign leading into a trail that will take you through part of the national forest in the White Mountains. Now, as we move down any trail, of course, where people are walking and things, you'll find soil, maybe a pathway. And I want to feature in this particular series of slides, we often say we don't see the trees for the forests, or we don't see the forests for the trees. And as we go into any natural situation, what do we see? And if I were leading a field trip, well, I would pause with the group I was with and show them some of the things. Well, we have the soil, and as we see here, we have grasses, weeds, shrubs, and forest. So the full array of uh, plants that we would find in any particular forest. And as you can see here, there's some softwoods, some evergreens, and here are some deciduous trees, broadleaf trees, who in the season of fall lose their leaves. And if I were taking a field trip, I would have the students look at uh, how many different types of grasses might you see here? What are the weeds like? Uh, Start picking maybe leaf samples, grass samples, and in the shrubs, leaf samples. And I would identify them or have the students look at a key to identify the organisms they found and recording at what was the nature of the habitat they were found in. And then walking down the path a little more. Again, this was probably all forest at one time, and they had maybe an old logging road or something through here because it definitely looks like, a field of some type that is going back to nature in a sense. But again, what are the various species and the habitat in which they're found? And here we see predominantly evergreens. And the typical evergreen up in this area were hemlocks. Okay, now we're looking into a more of an undergrowth, young vegetation, many seedlings, and again, lots of plants, what we might consider just the flora of a wooded area where there is light penetration and you get a good undergrowth like this. But you see the nature of undergrowth when there's many saplings springing up, developing. Some of the obvious ones are the white birch that we see here, quite predominant in this picture. Now, as we look at an individual weed or plant, uh, what we see on this one is a little bit of foamy, what we might call spit. Well, it's not really spit, but this is a nesting area of the spittlebug. And it generates this little spit-like material, and there it is. So again, as you look at the environment you're in and you're starting to look at specific plants, specific flora, there's also, in many cases, animals, in this case, an insect associated with it. And we can't forget the flower. These are what make any field trip worth its salt, so to speak. The beautiful, this looks like an aster of some type, and in full bloom. Here is a particular tree all by itself, plenty of sunlight, right on the edge of what the forest might be behind it. Now, I'm not going to try to overwhelm people with many, many names of things. Uh, in fact, I don't remember a lot of the names of things that I might have when I took the pictures. Again, some pretty dense undergrowth here, and once again, some white birches in the background. Now, as we look at the undergrowth in some detail, you'll notice here a certain dampness, whether there's a stream coming through here but you can see the dampness, and associated with dampness is ferns. So ferns are in a group all by themselves. Their whole reproductive cycle is something we study in biology, and they differ from the seed plants, flowering plants. Again, we're looking from a clearing into the side of the forest, and we see again the enormity of life and leaves. This is a hemlock in the background, I believe, and there is some mountain maple, I believe. Again, I'm a little bit away from remembering all the names, and these would probably be goldenrods of some type, whatever these are not in bloom at this time. But again, in a student way, we would ask them to take samples of the leaves and develop a collection of the different species they're observing on this field trip. Here again we see what looks like a maple leaf, but a large maple leaf. I believe these were called mountain maples. Here's a lot of glacial erratics here that we see forming a bed of a stream. And when you get to a stream, again, this would invite many animals, particularly insects, that you would find in connection with this, looking under the rocks and then replacing them as part of your field trip. And there is an unpaved road that we find in the White Mountain National Forest. Now, one of the things I want to show you and hopefully we can pick it out in the next few pictures, is what we call stratification, that in a uh, rocky edge of an ocean, and I have this in another slide series, we saw that there was a mussel layer in the tidal area there, then fucus, a seaweed, then barnacles, then blue-green algae, vertically laid one layer on top of another, giving you this vertical stratification. Well, this is something we often see in forest as well. There is a vertical stratification. You'll have the undergrowth, the seedlings, the crowns, and then the emergence. And this is something when you're in nature that you look for. Instead of just seeing trees, you're seeing a habitat, ecological niches in which organisms live. Here's a place where they probably were mining sand for some reason and left the vegetation off. And through time, of course, the grasses will come in and you'll have secondary succession here. But here we see the forest that normally covered all of this area. And again, relatively new growth here because of the densely packed saplings. And if you were going cross country, you'd find that sometimes it's difficult to get through areas like this. And this resulted from having lots of light allowed into this area, letting these saplings grow. And as they form an upper canopy and light then is lessened on the forest floor, some of these organisms that needed the light will start to die off. And in a real, true, mature forest, you don't see something like this. Here the trees are a little bigger, and notice the underlying layer here doesn't show the intense vegetation that we saw in the previous slide. And going back to this one too, these fallen logs also make up unique ecological communities as to the fungus that gets in there, and then the decomposition, and then the ants and termites and other animals that later return this fallen log to the forest. Okay, now we're seeing a little bit of this stratification that I told you about from an edge of the road. That here you see your shrubs a little bit in your undergrowth, and then your mature trees, and then up above here you'd have the canopy, and then you'd probably find some trees above that. So we often think of like 4 vertical stratifications. Now I believe this is the Peabody River, and it's supposed to be one of the purest rivers in New England. The government had put down some laws to keep these natural rivers in their natural states and prevent pollution. So here's a nice shot of it. Notice all of the glacial erratics that we see throughout here. Now we're looking at what is called the presidential range. And I have a little background slide that I want to show you. Now, I went to Wikipedia, and they will get credit for this. So, the presidential range, and I'll let you read this to yourself here. Mountain range, mountain, United States, peaks, named for American presidents, public figures, the 1700s, 1800s, notorious for having some of the worst weather. Okay. So Mount Washington is the tallest peak in New England, and there is a permanent weather station up on the top of it. And many are named for U.S. presidents. Okay. And here are some of the main ones. And I pull this sketch from there as well. There is Mount Washington, the tallest. And Madison and Jefferson's another one. And some of these, New England is noted for its mountains up in the New Hampshire and Vermont. The White Mountains are in the state of New Hampshire, basically, and attract a lot of visitors each year. And we're going to show you some of this. This is another picture that I took from Wikipedia. So this is actually looking out from my uncle's house across the street from where he lived. You could actually see part of the presidential range, and there I believe is Mount Washington. Now we are a little closer. I believe maybe this one is Mount Washington. A little closer look at it there. Another shot. And still another shot. The presidential range. Now, what we're going to look at is some mountain ecology now. And if you had the money and time, you could take a stage. Years ago, it was a stagecoach with horses. Now the stages are these little SUVs, and they will drive a family up to the summit of Mount Washington. The roads are a little bit tricky and maybe a little tad dangerous for your car. So we just did it by photography, and we'll take a look at it here. So at the base of Mount Washington, and this is one of the highways, I guess, going into Gorham here, New Hampshire. As you look at this forest, what do you see here? Well, definitely a lot of white birches, which are all deciduous trees. Notice these are all mostly deciduous and mixed with some evergreens. There's some evergreens in there as well. And here is a good picture just a little bit further up. This would be mixed hardwood, softwood. Now, as you go up in elevation, we see this, let's say, starting in Connecticut and going up more into Massachusetts, Vermont, and New Hampshire, and then into Maine, you get less deciduous trees and more conifer trees due to the climate changes. You're going from a somewhat warmer climate to a cooler climate. And as you go up a mountain, this also happens. It's more condensed. The distances from the mixed deciduous to what we call the conifer forest gets compressed. And we'll see that as we go up. Now, here we're still in a relatively mixed area, but as you get up higher, you see there are just primarily conifer trees. And then you go up higher still, like right about there, you get what is called the tree line. That is, below it are trees. Above it, you don't have the trees anymore. Well, how come? Because it's too cold up there. Okay, going up the mountain. So down below we have the mixed forest. Then we get more conifers, a transition belt, and then finally your conifers toward the top, and then the tree line. So here we see basically a conifer forest. Here it's still mixed, and then there's the tree line. And that's what I wanted to show you. And another picture of it. And then finally, when you get to the summit, and up there somewhere, never been up there, there is a weather station. And I believe there might be a hotel there as well, but I'm not sure. It's a very severe weather. If you ever get too warm and you want to be cool a lot, there you go. The summit of Mount Washington. And that will wrap up our program.